Hey, I think we're going. What's up, Skews patrons? Everybody across the Skew universe out there. We're using a different program, different software to record this bonus edition of Weekly Skews. So, you know how we already are with tech shit to begin with. So we thought we'd introduce a new wrinkle into the mix, see how that goes. But we're here. I'm Trey, and that's Mark. What's up, Mark?
What's funny is while you were saying that, you froze on my end for half a second. So
Really?
that was awesome. That was perfect. Yeah.
Well, that's
Also,
part of the idea with this new thing we're using is that the finished product will not have any of those freezes and skips or anything. That's what we're hoping. So we'll see. But yeah, we'll see how it turns
It
out.
also prompted you to do a Scottish accent for a reason, so that was cool.
Yeah, that was before we started recording, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It's my favorite accent to do, and I've just sort of come out of it and in and out of it in the last couple of days. I have no idea. I've just been sort of talking in a brogue. I've not been. It may be because I've been covering it in the book I'm writing. I suppose that's probably it.
Yeah.
But I've been talking. Talking that way a lot lately. Anyway.
Yeah. Makes you want to fucking fly to England and spit on the Queen's body. Hell yeah.
Hey. That's a boy. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
This is. We should probably also say, as of right now, it is 1:38 p.m. on the left coast on Friday, September 16th. Because of this new software, producer Matt's going to edit this later today or tomorrow, and y'all will see it on Saturday. But I thought I would say when we recorded it, in case some crazy shit happens between now and when they see it, they'll understand that we weren't just ignoring, some massive story or whatnot.
Yeah. And if I drop dead in the middle of this, it's just because I just got my fourth COVID booster.
Nice.
And flu shot at the same time. So I'm shooting lasers out my eyes, man. It's fucking awesome.
How does the you're super magnetic. Got a great Wi-Fi connection on your skull there.
See,
The
5G stuff coming off my head.
can people like our age, can we just like go and get a fourth or a new booster, a fourth shot? You just walk into a place that does them and be like, hey, give me one of those.
Yeah, my wife just made an appointment at Walgreens and we went and got it. I didn't have any
Pretty
side
sweet.
effects so far, so that's awesome.
I need to do that. The first two shots did absolutely nothing to me. I'm not saying they didn't work. I believe they did work. They gave me no side effects at all. But then the booster rocked my shit and was a major pain in the ass for about 36 hours, and then I was fine.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll still sign up and get another.
Yeah, I didn't do any deep research or anything, but the pharmacist said it should be, even if you had side effects, it should be less than the booster because it's a lower dose.
Okay.
Less than the first booster. Yeah. So that's cool. Everybody get your shots. I'm one of the lucky few who still hasn't had COVID yet. Don't know how. I've done everything to put
You
my mouth
love
on
bars.
your
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Eating off the floor. You're always doing that type of thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know how you haven't gotten either. Yeah, I got. I've had it once, and it was quite frankly, basically nothing. I barely even knew I had anything, but that I'm still not complacent. I fully expect to get it again and be bedridden at some point, but it wasn't too bad for me the first time around.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's a lot of shit happening. Trying to put the show together was like, what the fuck are we, like, it's like, I want to talk about all of it, but it's like too much for one show. And like, just to sum up where we're at, Abbott and DeSantis did a little bit of light human trafficking, which we're going to talk about on Tuesday, I think. Large Brain Marge kicked someone. Trump confessed to more crimes. The My Pillow guy got waylaid at a Hardee's. Senate Dems are holding up the gay marriage bill until after the election, which may or may not be a good idea, but we'll get to all that in the flagship Skews, at least some of it. But today, I'm mad about railroads like I'm 12 again playing Monopoly, so we're going to talk about railroads.
Sure.
But before we get to all that, a story me and Corey talked about on 2 Skews ago. Brett Favre caught up in his own personal Watergate in Mississippi. More stuff came out about that. He apparently, all these people, some people are getting prosecuted. One flipped, and she filed some of Brett Favre's text messages in some sort of lawsuit. I can't really track all of it. But so he's been saying that he didn't know they were welfare funds and yada, 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 which is weird because the woman he was dealing with who filed these text messages was the director of a nonprofit that had gotten a bunch of block welfare grants. So he was talking to the welfare lady and saying, he didn't know there were welfare funds.
Yeah,
But
he
anyway.
also. I know that the screenshots from the. First of all, listen. I've had a pretty hard time with this whole thing. It's not been fun for me. I mean, this is straight up. It's a childhood hero of mine, Mark. You're a little bit older than me. I don't know where you were at on Brett Favre, but I was a huge fan growing up. I've sort of known since like the dick pic and cheating on his cancer wife days and stuff that he probably wasn't the coolest dude. But I mean, you know, being the person that I am from the background I'm from is just like fucking stealing from welfare in the South. It's like, don't get much lower than that. It's pretty sorry. But anyway, on the note of what you were saying about how he's pretending not to know I saw some of those screenshots, those text messages, and like he's clearly very worried about people finding out about it. You know,
Yeah.
He's
let
like,
let me read the text message right here. If you were to pay me, is there any way the media can find out where it came from and how much? And this lady who snitched on him said, "No, we've never had that information publicized. I understand you being uneasy about that, though." And what they're talking about is like he got money in 4 buckets. He got paid to cut some radio ads about how you should work hard and not be poor, which he did. And then he got paid another bunch of money for like another $1 million for some speeches that he did not give.
right.
They gave a bunch of money to a nasal spray that would prevent concussions, which he had investments in. And then there was $5 million of welfare money used to build a volleyball center at Ole Miss where his daughter plays volleyball.
Southern Miss, right? He went to Southern Miss.
Southern Miss, yes, sir.
Yes.
Sorry, yeah, wherever his daughter plays volleyball. Yeah. So this is all fucking crooked as shit. And Shannon Sharp, who former NFL tight end, he's a sports broadcaster now, did a whole rant about this yesterday, talking about how Mississippi is America's poorest state, and here you're paying made $137 million in football money, and then probably another $100 million in endorsements. He still does commercials, and they're just paying him like he was supposed to repay the $1.1 million for the speeches, and the investigator also charged him with $200 some thousand dollars in interest. He paid the principal, but not the interest. A guy who's worth $200 million is fucking skimping out on $200,000 that he owes poor people in Mississippi. And I can't wrap my fucking head around any of this. It's also goddamn crooked. And Shannon Sharp made the point that like, if you're poor and black and you steal, you defraud the government of $400 in EBT money, you're going to jail for welfare fraud.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but here is this guy who fucking stole millions, and by the way, all this stuff. Why is a nonprofit getting blocked welfare money from the government? That's because the welfare reform in the '90s allowed this, and you're like, well, that sounds like an easy way to do a bunch of fucking theft and fraud. And you're like, yeah, so thank Bill Clinton for that. That was his brainchild.
Probably the idea, a feature,
yeah.
not a bug. What you just said,
Yeah.
I would imagine. Also, I don't know if this is true, but I read in a lot of discussion about this or surrounding this thing, this scandal, that they have like horrifically high rates of denial in the welfare program for regular people. Anyway, like basically people who really need it can't get it. And then at the same time, they're giving millions of dollars to fucking Brett Favre, Hall of Fame quarterback Brett Favre.
I think the number I saw is only 3,000 people in Mississippi actually get welfare benefits, and here's $72 million that went missing. $72 million. Yeah. Oh God! In other sports, I think the first ever Patreon episode we ever did was about evil sports owners, and
it was one of them. One of the first ones.
Yeah, the news hook for that one was an ESPN investigation into Robert Sarver, the owner of the Phoenix Suns. Yeah. And because of that investigative report, the NBA commissioned like an investigation, and it came out earlier this week. And he got off, like the slap on the wrist as I begin to describe it. He got $10 million fine, which is like less than 1% of his net worth, and a year suspension. And the stuff in the report. The actual investigative part, like there's a whole subsection called repeated use of the N-word.
Sorry. That's just immediately made me think of that Wikipedia thing we bring up all the time. It's like live your life so as to avoid a section of your Wikipedia page that has anything to do with Hitler controversy, Hitler remarks. You know that, like, it's sort of. I feel like this is a similar thing. You don't want a subsection and anything written about you that's entitled repeated use of the N-word. I mean, unless you're Snoop Dogg or something. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
Then it's fine.
So there's also a bunch of sexism stuff. Like, he reassigned a woman who was pregnant because he thought she should be breastfeeding. Like, he basically demoted this woman to make her breastfeed. And there's a whole, like, he berated a woman till he made her cry. And then in response to that, he had HR convening a meeting of all the women who work for his for the Sons to be told how they should not be crying in the workplace. And for that, the second half of the report exonerates him. It says, like, well, he didn't mean all that stuff he said. And then all the other stuff about the testimony is like, well, memory can be fleeting. So the NBA's official finding was you can't believe your memories. So therefore, we don't know what actually happened. And it's like just gaslighting all the way down. This whole thing's fucking crooked. And yeah, I don't like. Adam Silver they did a press conference about this, and he's a commissioner in the NBA. And one of the reporters asked him, "Well, like, if you did this, you'd be fired, right?" And he's like, "Yeah." And then and then he's like, "Well, if a player did this, he wouldn't play anymore." And they're like, "Yeah." And it's like they asked him, like, well, why is he being held to a lower standard? And his essential argument was like, we have no choice but to hold rich people to lower standards because they're powerful. And it's like, oh fuck, he just said that out loud, basically.
Right, saying the quiet part out loud. Yeah. At least the NBA, I don't know, does something to these people. I was going to bring up Dan Snyder in the NFL. How he's just been totally untouchable. And then I remembered they actually did penalize another owner, Stephen Ross of the Miami Dolphins. So it's like the NFL. At first, I thought it was like, if you're an NFL owner, they're just not going to do shit to you because they're all on the same page with each other. But then they did penalize the owner of the Dolphins, and Dan Snyder still skates through. So I don't know.
Yeah, didn't they banish an owner of the Panthers for some sexual harassment stuff too?
My understanding of that was that, if I remember correctly, like, there was a scandal and some shit was going down, but he kind of got out before the curtain dropped, I think. Meaning, like, I think he sold it and fucked off before they could do any of that to him, I think. But I might be wrong. It was Jerry Richardson. I believe he had an N-word section, too, if I recall correctly, or close to it.
It's such a funny system because if you're punished, which means they make you sell the team, the values have always gone up like triple.
Right.
So your punishment is making billions of dollars of free money.
Massive profit. Yeah, right. Yeah, ain't
Yeah.
that America?
All right. So, yeah. You want to talk about trains?
Yeah, let's party like it's 1899, buddy. Fucking trains and labor unions in here. Let's get old school with it. I like it. Here we go.
Yeah. I was thinking about how, like, all the stuff we have, we don't think about how it actually arrives to us. Like, whether it be a hat you get off Amazon or like a banana from South America. But yeah, it's almost all on train at some point. We get all of our shit from trains, and the people that run the trains are fed up of, dying on the job and never seeing their families, and they're about to go on fucking strike. And to explain up top, part of the dynamic here that's the problem. This is going to be us talking heavy episode with only a couple of video clips because, one, the negotiations are behind the scenes. So we don't have any dumbasses to roast a lot in this. And two, the mainstream media coverage of this has been abysmal. It's been framed either as a problem for consumers, which will be a problem for consumers. It's not the main thing. Like, prices would go up and you wouldn't have as much stuff on the grocery store shelves and gas would be more expensive, yada, yada, yada. Or it's been framed as a political horse race problem. Like, what will this do to Biden in the midterms? And I just want to say fuck off to all that shit. I'm going to talk about it a little bit, but it's like people are literally dying. People are dying. And that's
I don't.
I'm
not gonna lie. I don't know. I haven't heard hardly anything about this. I feel like.
Yeah, it wasn't covered a lot, but 125,000 rail workers were considering going on strike, which would grind the whole national economy to an absolute halt. And a thing to hold your head here is what they were asking for is unpaid sick leave. That's all they want. Is to be able to get a day off to go to the fucking doctor when they're sick, or to be able to attend a
unpaid.
Yes.
So that was their one and only ask was unpaid sick leave.
That was
and
their
the
main thing.
And Big Train was like, no, fuck that.
Yeah.
Get back on the rails. Get back to clearing those hobos out of the rail yards, or we'll fucking fire your ass, or whatever all they do.
I saw one train engineer said he averaged 30 days off a year. And like for an average person, if you work 5 days a week, that's 52 weekends. That's 104 days off a year just normally before you factor in vacations and holidays and shit, and they don't get any of that stuff. Basically, they're on call 24/7. Even when they think they have a day off, they have to sit by the phone and wait to see if they call in, because they've cut staff so much that if one guy doesn't show up, like you've been at a plane when a pilot doesn't show at the airport and a pilot doesn't show up, like nobody can go anywhere, and it causes a cascading series of effects for everyone all around America who are missing flights now. That's sort of like what's happening with the railroad industry. We're going to talk about planes a little bit too later, but
so this is weird. I've had the complete wrong impression. Like most Americans, I think, most present-day Americans, I'm pretty train dumb, and I admit that. I don't know. Me and Corey were in the UK. We were just marveling about trains the whole time. We were just like, these are great. Why don't we have more of these? Then you come back over here and find out, like, we actually do have trains. Just seems like people don't fuck with them. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. I don't know much about trains, having grown up in this country in the era that I did. But Drew, friend of the show, guy, Drew Morgan, who I think most skewers are aware of, his dad has worked for the train company, one of the train companies, for like ever. And he's from a very, very small town. And I had always gotten the impression from talking to Drew that like working for the train company was like that's a sweet gig for like rednecks in a town. You know what I mean? It was like it always was sort of presented to me as though like Drew's family did all right because his daddy worked for the railroad type of thing. Yeah. It's like around there where he grew up, working for the railroad is fucking. It's hard to get in on that. That's like a sweet cherry. That's how I thought it worked. I didn't know they were being abused and were unhappy and all this shit. I've been lied to.
My cousin's husband is like works for the railroad, and he had to like be on a years long waiting list to get that job. It is a highly coveted job, but because it does pay pretty well. Historically, it was a sweet gig, but things have gotten like worse.
Yeah,
and that's an important thing to understand here is that they've gotten worse faster because what's happened is how Walmart uses everybody adopted the Walmart strategy of doing just in time supply chain stuff, which is why the supply chain falls apart so quickly. Like, railroads have started doing that with people. Like we're always running on the bare minimum. Like one thing that happened is they cut down to 2 engineers per train, and now we're trying to go to 1. Now these are guys who are working like 30 straight days, 16-hour shifts, and one guy falls asleep and the train crashes. They carry hazardous chemicals and shit.
Right.
Like this is not just about their safety. It's also about your safety. Because
is this what happened with that recent train derailment? Was it because of this whole thing? Was it? You know what I'm talking about?
I don't know.
There was an American train derailment like 2 weeks ago or something like that. It was the first one I'd heard of in a while, and I didn't even think anything about it at the time. But now that you're saying all this, I'm wondering if it was related.
When I lived in Arlington, Texas, a train cuts that town in half, and you'd have to stop and wait 15 minutes for a big long freight train to go by. And we had derailments fairly often. It would happen. It's not like super rare because of the switch yards. They'll bump into each other and fall over and shit. Which is like people. These are very dangerous jobs. People lose their legs and arms and fall to their deaths. It's fairly common. It's one of the most dangerous jobs in America, which is why it's not good to be doing it when you're half asleep. They were headed
there was for some reason a dump truck across the train track, and this train, nailed the dump truck, and that's what happened. So I guess it's unrelated. But yeah, over 150 people injured, 4 people killed. It was a passenger train going from Chicago to L.A. and then in Missouri hit a truck. So that's a bummer.
Yeah, people get there are always, when I was in Texas, there always like PSA campaigns to tell people how to avoid getting hit by trains because they get hit by trains a lot, which seems sort of ridiculous. But I also know a lady who she hit a train in the side,
like in a car,
just drove into the
like
side
T-boned the train. That feels like that should be easy to not do. My whole life, I've never had a problem not doing that.
Yeah, it's probably got to be one of the dumbest genres of car accidents.
Yeah.
Because of a lot of this stuff, we'll get more in depth in a minute. The railroads and labor unions were headed towards a strike. The railroads actually were going to do a lockout. They were the ones who were going to fucking cause the supply chain collapse, and they were going to do it on purpose to make the public angry at the unions and the workers, so they could keep fucking them for unpaid sick days. They would not with no unpaid sick days. Basically, you can't call in sick is what the dynamic is. The new contract provided a 24% pay increase, which is awesome, and immediate payouts that average $11,000 upon ratification. if the union ratifies it, including in addition to an extra paid day off for workers. So they got one extra paid day off. So there was Biden managed to avert it, at least in a temporary. So there was this tentative agreement that the union still has to vote on, and they have a 90-day cooling off period before negotiations. They've managed to push this back till after the midterms because the unions, of course, are Democratic supporters. They don't want to fuck Democrats. But anyway, if you want to, I want you to hear in their own rail workers' own words why they're so miserable. He'd play that.
The impact of a railroad strike across the industry, it would be like asking what would be the results if a nuclear bomb went off in New York. Obviously,
Jesus.
It would be utter chaos and catastrophe.
Supply chain backup might get a lot worse. I'll read the text. As 115,000 railroad workers gear up for nationwide strike over crushing conditions.
Seems intentional, like the railroad industry is intentionally trying to create an oppressive work environment so that they can reach their end goal and be able to give more money back to Wall Street.
Railroad workers have been working without a contract for more than 3 years.
These workers have worked now for the last 3 years throughout a pandemic, putting themselves and their families at risk without a raise. They have not received any pay increase during that time. At the same time, they've seen their numbers dwindle dramatically. They've also seen the highest profits in the history of railroading over that same stretch of time.
They want more with less, and that comes down to people, resources, locomotives, maintenance, everything.
All right, you cut it, Matt. So, why do we care about trains? Like I said, everything comes on trains, but the big things as far as what will cause chaos is like the entire agriculture sector would basically be shut down because ammonia, fertilizer, agricultural products all travel on trains. Price of ethanol will go up, which affects gas prices. Grain shipments will stop tomorrow, which means no bread anywhere. It also, this only affects people based in the northeastern seaboard, but Amtrak would have to cancel long distance trips. Which that's basically targeted at. Joe Biden famously loves Amtrak because he rode it back and forth to Delaware. And your New York media classes, that's who would care about that because you go back and forth to New York to D.C. on trains.
Yeah, people. People up in that part of the world, they fuck with trains the way that they do in Europe. But I feel like that makes sense because that part of our country is the only part that's like comparable to Europe in terms of like, you know, the distances between places. But Amtrak, though, I'm telling you, dude, there's all kinds of Amtrak trains out here in California. You take an Amtrak train from L.A. to Reno to fucking, I know because I looked into it, but you look further into those, and for some reason they're like way longer than just driving would be. I guess there's a lot of stops and shit. It's not like in the UK where it's like, a train is clearly the best option. But I was stunned to find out that they even exist, but they do. So, you know.
Yeah. I think the problem with long-distance train rides is the freight companies own the tracks, and Amtrak just rents a spot on them, basically. So if a freight train needs to go by, they have to pull over and wait for it.
That's part of the problem, that would make a lot of sense.
Yeah. That's one of those things where we don't that's the argument against trains all over America is that like the spaces are too spread out once you get west of the Mississippi, and maybe that's fair, but you can still do high speed rail basically almost every Midwestern city is along I-35. You could do a high speed train up and down I-35. The same thing from like San Diego, L.A., San Francisco, up the coast. But we're not going to do that because we don't invest in shit here in America.
Correct.
So. Another thing is national defense-wise, like the American military moves stuff around on trains a lot. You'll see tanks going by and stuff, but also a lot of the stuff going to Ukraine is getting moved on rails, so that would also impact the war in Ukraine. But the union leaders are like, the companies are manufacturing this fear about all this stuff happening to put pressure on us to keep working against our will, right? They're basically doing an embargo against American citizens, which is like one way to think about it. To get into the details of why they were going to strike, potential rail worker strike caused by erratic scheduling. Workers must constantly be on call to work, making it impossible to live their lives. Here's a guy named Hugh Sawyer who's this interview was on his 65th birthday. All right, he's a 35-year veteran of Norfolk Southern, and he spent the day before working 12 hours, and the trip he'd done had just when he started his career, it used to take 5 to 6 hours, but again, it took 12 when he made it the other day. And he got home around 7:30 on his birthday morning and was only able to sleep for 5 hours. And he spent his 65th birthday constantly refreshing his computer to see if he's been called into work. That's just a normal work day for them. And he made it to 8 o'clock when they did this interview. And if he makes it to midnight without getting called in, he will get a day off.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's
and
fucked up.
there's also a bigger thing. Yeah. It's like you can't actually de-stress if you're.
No, what are you supposed to do? Right, it's you find out after your day off has already happened that it was in fact a day off, but you spent that entire day off wondering if it was going to turn into a day on. Like, I mean, how is that supposed to work? Can't even get drunk or nothing. Like, all you can do is sit there and wonder because you can't get can't get drunk if they're about to get called in to drive a fucking train or do train stuff. I would imagine they frown upon that sort of thing. So
You can't even start a board game with your kids. They have to quit in the middle. You can't even do that. Like here, let me read from this. Here's a post from a guy on a railroad union Facebook group. Is a lot of people are wondering why the railroad is facing a strike. It's not money, folks. I want to keep it. This is me. I just want to keep reiterating that. The money's been ironed out already. It's quality of life issues. About 50% of railroaders are on call 24/7 unless they're on personal time or already at work. So you're on call unless you're already at work. That's a good system. We don't have a schedule. There's no set schedule. After 16 years, this guy has 3 weeks vacation and 9 personal days a year, and that's it, about 30 days. And the railroad wants all that to be scheduled. But how do you schedule a funeral in October if it's only February? How do you schedule for a wedding that hasn't been announced? How do you schedule to take your spouse to the doctor? That's the railroad's trying its best to make us look like the bad guys here, but we're not. We just want to see our family and live a little. And back to the first guy whose birthday it was, he said something that I thought was pretty poignant, and it's sort of a nobody wants to work anymore thing, but in a good way. He says he's seen a real sea change in how people feel about time off in the past few years. I don't know what happened during the pandemic that woke everybody up, and I'm talking about all of America, but yeah, it had a big effect. People are saying now there's something more to life than wasting it on the railroad or at my job. And that's true across the board. I think it's helped people reestablish some different priorities in their lives. Which to that, I want to say bravo. We've talked about before, America. We have a sick relationship with work in America.
Vice it's just listen. Sounds to me like you're not much of a hustler, Mark. I don't think feel like you're not really on that grind set, Mark. You gotta learn how to ride the grind, baby. You gotta stack that paper.
If we count this as a job, Trey, I got 3 jobs. I work the minute I wake up to the minute I go to bed, but it's stuff I like doing, and if I didn't want to do some of it, I'd quit. By the way, here's my 2 weeks notice. Fuck you, Trey. So Vice did this interview with a bunch of freight rail workers, just basically getting anecdotes. First guy says the best thing to tell the American public is we have so little time off now that we have to parent our children via FaceTime. As a patriot and someone who really cares about this country, I do not want to strike, but we're past the point of being polite. The patriot thing's going to come up because the government's very heavily involved in railroads to the point where they can prevent strikes if they want to, which is why they haven't struck yet. One of the reasons. We'll come to that in a second. I wish people knew that we don't get weekends off and can frequently work up to 276 hours a month by law. 276 hours a month is basically 30 times 10. You know, that's
right,
or 28 times 10. So that's a lot of fucking working. This lady talk about how railroads were a great job. They were tough, but things have gotten worse. Here's a quote from a woman who's married to a guy who's a train engineer. I have a shirt that says, I'm a railroad wife on the front. On the back it says, yes, he's working. No, I don't know when he'll be home. Yes, we're still married. No, he isn't imaginary. And she says, it used to be a joke shirt, but now it's just a sad shirt. Which made you laugh. Good on you, lady, for having a sense of humor.
Yeah.
So railroads did offer more money, but in exchange for them to continue living shit lives, right? So the most powerful
now that I think about it, in talking to Drew about his dad, and I'm fucking just putting Drew and his whole family dynamic on Front Street here, but I think it's okay. I think it's okay. He, I know because I had a conversation with him about this exact thing because I have kids and I'm a comedian, so I travel a lot. And his dad, it has been presented as it's a really good gig and he made good money and all this stuff, but also his dad was like very often gone, because he worked for the railroad. Like he was hardly ever there because I've had conversations with Drew about how he felt about that or how that worked for him or whatever with his dad always being gone. And Drew turned out pretty terribly, so I don't feel great about it. But I'm kidding, but all I'm saying is like now that I'm thinking. At first, I was like, I thought the railroad hit, and then but now as we keep talking through it, I'm remembering other aspects of what I've heard from Drew about having a family member that works for the railroad, and it's like that was definitely always also a part of it. He got paid well, but he was never at home because they worked him to death. So, been going on for a minute, I suppose.
I've got another familiar, the flip side of a railroad horror story in my family. My papa, my mom's dad, worked for the railroad. His job was basically to walk down coal, because they stack the coal and you walk it down to like pack it to make sure it doesn't fall off the train. And he fell off the train and shattered both his ankles and was permanently disabled. And they didn't do shit for him, and he wouldn't sue them because he thought the railroad was his friend. My mom couldn't sue him.
Yeah, that's like that. That's that company man, company town stuff. Like you get with like big coal mining companies and railroads and shit like that. People don't want to bite the hand that feeds or whatever. 16 tons. What do you get? That's right.
Another day older and deeper in debt.
That's right. That's all.
So why unions are important here is like if you're powerful enough as a union, you can force the company to treat the workers as partners, right? And I mean that in a literal sense. Like the most powerful unions in America are probably sports leagues,
for sure. Our unions are pretty good too, right? Out here, Hollywood unions.
They're pretty good. People are well compensated, but we're also just slowly negotiating our. It's getting worse and worse and worse because we don't have the power to claw much of it back. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So but whereas in the NBA, I think the NBA they get 50% of basketball related revenue. They literally just when I'm gonna say treat as partners, that's what I mean. It's 50%. I think the NFL is 50% too. I don't know what it is in baseball. I only follow baseball closely. But so what would that look like in the railroads? All right. Again, that news report, like the video said, profits are booming for the railroads. Supply chain issues are profit centers for them. So BNSF, which is owned by Warren Buffett, we're going to talk about in a minute, is the largest rail company in America. Last year, they had a net profit of $8.8 billion. They have 35,000 workers. So if they kept half their profit and split the rest with all the railroad employees, everyone would receive a $125,000 raise. Union Pacific is the second largest railroad in the U.S. Their income last year was $6.9 billion. They have 32,000 employees. That means everybody would get an extra $106,600 a year on top of what they're currently being paid if they split it evenly. CSX is third place. They had $3.9 billion. If they did the same profit split with their 21,000 employees, everyone will get $94,000 more a year. Norfolk Southern had $3.03 billion with 18,000 employees. That's an $84,000 a year raise per person. So that's what like an equitable split between capital and labor would look like.
Sure, Mark. But if they did that, how much would the shareholders get? Because I didn't hear that in there. Probably much less, I would assume. Okay, somebody needs to think about that. Because that's what's truly important in the running of a business.
Yeah. So the railroads, of course, like to keep things the way they are because they don't want to give up all that money to workers. So again, going back to the idea that they were trying to force a lockout and frame the strike to where they could win the PR battle. The railroad bosses are going to tank the whole economy in order to prevent their workers from having the time to go to routine doctor's appointments or take a sick day. Fucking ghouls, and a lot of you are framing this like it's all the workers' fault because it's always the workers' fault in America.
Always.
People take labor's management side and labor disputes all the time in this country.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what's going to happen? So late last night, the Biden administration, we're talking about the politics this in a minute, Biden and the labor secretary were personally involved in these negotiations to try to prevent this because it would be a disaster for the midterms. But also, these lives are a disaster for these workers. So they came to a tentative agreement with the union management. Now the workers will vote. Now, they're still super mad. Now, even though they've gotten a much better deal than they had, they might still strike just because they're fucking pissed. Which is why but the administration got a longer cooling off period, so maybe by the time they vote, people have come to their senses and whatever. And they're also again trying to put it off close to the election or after the election as possible. But going back to why Biden and the labor secretary are involved in these discussions and why they haven't already struck with 3 years without a contract and no raises. It's because the Railway Labor Act gives Congress the power to block any strike by workers. So they'll do this in the name of free movement or commerce because it's such a disaster. So another way to put this is these guys are so important, they cannot strike.
Right.
But so undervalued, they cannot get paid or get fair sick leave policies.
Right.
Right? I said guys in the gender neutral way, by the way. I didn't mean to sound like there are no lady trained engineers. I'm sure there are.
But what do they like if they Is it like when Reagan fired all the air traffic controllers? Is that how that would work in practice? Like what if they if they try and the government's like, no, we have the right to say you can't do that. What, they can't like force them to go back to work, can they? So what they would just like fire them all and replace them is how it would work. I don't see what they could really do about it if they all just agreed to not show up one day. Like the shit's it's gonna go down unless they threaten them at gunpoint or something, which, you know, I wouldn't put past this country, but yeah.
I'm not sure exactly the mechanics of how they force them to keep going to work, but apparently they think they have the power to do that. But like, what's the word for being forced to work a job you don't want to work?
Indentured servitude, slavery.
Yes. Feudalism.
Yeah.
Yesterday, a couple of Republicans tried to introduce a motion, like a measure that would force them to go back to work, and Bernie Sanders clogged it up. Yay, fuck yeah, Bernie. He basically, they were trying to do that thing where they can speed through stuff if no one objects. All he did was object, so it slowed it down to let the negotiations keep going. I think to reach the outlines of a deal that worked out for labor. And people were like, by the way, he wasn't fucking Biden on this. This is him working with Biden.
Yeah.
But the centrist Dems still did their centrist shit and went all over Twitter, and we're talking about how Bernie was fucking over the Democratic Party, which is fucking stupid. You're thinking too hard about simple shit. The point of governing is to do good things, not just to continue in power for no reason, right? Among those, like this is, I'm quoting from a labor historian named Eric Loomis. Among those who weren't real thrilled with this decision by the board, which is just to backtrack a little bit, there was a labor board that recommended that the workers not strike, and Biden told them to fuck off, and he'll take care of it. So he ignored his own advice from his centrist Dem fucking council who was trying to screw over the workers. So Bernie didn't go out on a limb. He was protecting Biden's flank. But the big takeaway here is if Biden had taken his mediator's recommendations, heard from the workers that it wasn't enough, and used all his power to pressure the companies to cave on these issues. All the stuff Biden did is not a common move, and once again shows he really does care about unions and improving the lives of union workers and central to Biden's agenda. It's really quite impressive. That's all from Loomis. Biden, this same labor historian, gave an interview to The Atlantic. I was reading from his personal blog, but this is from The Atlantic, entitled article titled, "Is Biden the most pro-union president in history?" And the short answer is yes, but the bar is very fucking
low. Well, do you remember on one episode, and it pissed people off even at the time, like even our, like liberal on one episode there was a similar article, and we talked about, and it's not like we were saying that he was, but it was basically like, is Joe Biden the most progressive president in U.S. history, or whatever? And it was like, that really did not hit for people, at the time. Like, no, of course not. But it's like you said, it's like, I don't know, he probably is, but like only because look at what the rest of them have been like. You know what I mean? Like, look how the country's always been ran before. So, yeah, it's not really something to write home about. But, yeah, I feel like this isn't the first such article about Biden that's come up, and it always riles people up, I feel.
First place for white people is still probably FDR, but he was shit for everybody else.
Right, yeah.
So, quote unquote for Loomis here again, where President Biden differs from previous presidents, both Democratic and Republican, is that he's really determined not to use his power to hurt unions. So just not hurting unions is the bar here. Right? To be the best labor president in American history. Whereas other past presidents may have put a lot of the pressure on the union leaders, Biden uses his power to put pressure on the companies. Like, going back to those congressional acts that prevent people from striking, presidents would use the military to crush strikes in the past. This is what President Hayes did with the Great Railroad Strike in 1877. This is what President Cleveland did with the Pullman Strike in 1894. And those are like some of the most iconic moments of violent American labor past.
Right.
So, to answer your question, is that they tried to strike, you could send in the National Guard to crack their fucking skulls. The labor secretary, by the way, is Marty Walsh. Sorry, go ahead.
It's just, it's funny because I said that a minute ago, and I said, what are they going to do? Force them at gunpoint? And then I was like, I wouldn't put that past this country. But, like, I'm aware of all the times that they literally did that exact thing, over the course of our country's history. But for some reason, it didn't pop into my head at the time. It's like, oh, right, they've done that, More than once.
Yeah.
They've done exactly that. So, yeah, they probably would do that. So, yeah. Anyway.
A couple months ago, a federal judge regarding the coal miners' strike in Alabama that's been going on for like a year and a half, 2 years, basically ordered them they couldn't do picket lines anymore because they were intimidating the scabs. And it's like, yeah, that's the fucking point. The point is to intimidate the scabs. So, the secretary, I didn't know who the Secretary of Labor was before this because I haven't followed that department closely, but it's a guy named Marty Walsh, who's a former union member turned union official, then the mayor of Boston, and I think he ran for Congress or state senate or something after that. So he's a labor guy. You know what his predecessor was in this job under Trump? Antonin Scalia's kid.
Yeah.
So, again... You're going to get way better union stuff under Democrats, even the ones who aren't great, but Biden at least is working hard on this, and I appreciate that, because we roast him a lot. I want to say thank you for being good on labor, Joe Biden. So this headline made me laugh. This is from the Washington Post. As U.S. rail strike looms, White House aides scramble to avert crisis. Now, it makes the article is framed as though it's about the White House. Again, the National Press Corps talking about this through politics when it's about money. Because the article includes this paragraph: engineers and conductors face penalties for taking any time off, including weekends, outside of the holidays and pre-planned vacation in the case of emergencies, as we talked about. Workers have been fired for going to routine doctor's appointments or family members' funerals. Conductors and engineers can be on call for 14 consecutive days for up to 12 hours daily. Again, no sick days. Why is the article about the White House when people are fucking being treated like... I mean, these railroad execs, their forefathers got rich on free Chinese slave labor, and they just want to go back to the good old days, I guess.
Yeah, no, it's another thing. I just didn't realize we still had these like fucking sort of robber baron railroad tycoons still operate. Again, I don't know why I'm surprised by any of that, but it's just kind of funny to me. It's like a throwback to fucking Vanderbilt days or something. What the railroad? Yeah. I just didn't realize they still rolled like that. That's all.
You remember a couple weeks ago we talked about worker productivity scores?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the Warren Buffett's BNSF Railroad started a version of this. This is from the same article. They use a convoluted system called High-Vis, under which workers start with a point balance and then lose points if they're unavailable to work because they're sick, have a family emergency, or other reasons. If the balance is 0, they get a 10-day suspension and a 20-day suspension if it happens again. Reaching 0 for the third time in a 2-year period means getting fired. So... they take like assholes will put cash on the table for a tip and then take money away every time
Oh god, I hate that.
Yeah, so the railroad's doing that shit for fucking sick days. Yeah, everything about this makes me so furious. So yeah, tell me the politics of this. This made me laugh. So the strike was averted late yesterday, for the time being anyway, at least until the workers vote in a month or two or whenever the vote's set from now. But a full day after that happened, this article's from this morning, this headline, Biden to blame for what could have been a disastrous railroad spike. This is from a right-wing think tank CEO. So Biden's to blame for a thing that did not happen.
Right. That was almost bad. Yeah. If it would have been, it's like, so he averted a crisis? No. He almost caused something really bad to happen. Is what what you should be worried about.
There's actually a video. This headline's based on a video. The interview this guy did on Fox Business. If you have the video, Matt, if you could play it, that would be awesome.
Yeah, in some ways they did, but we shouldn't have even got here in the first place. We need to look at how we did get here. I'm usually the first to bash on unions, but in this instance, you really can't. The unions were representing the best interest of its members. They were having poor working conditions due to Biden's economy and other decisions he'd made, including long work hours, including not being able to travel so far from their office areas so if they were on call. But then you can't blame the BNSF and these other railroad companies either, because they were representing really the best interest of us, the consumers, getting food delivered to us. Petroleum taken across the country, all things that are done by railroad. What you can blame is the Biden administration, because they're the ones that have, created vaccine mandates, which these railroad workers were covered by. They had to get vaccinated in order to keep their jobs. And then on top of that, they were also, Biden's printing out money like it's going out of fashion. and basically incentivizing people not to work.
So, if you follow his logic, the workers do lives suck and they're working too much, but Joe Biden's also making them not work, and also our daddies, the railroads, are just trying to take care of us, and these poor workers are fucking
Right.
And also, Trump is the one that printed out the free money. I got the damn check or whatever. It had Trump's signature on it. I remember it clearly. And this is also fucking stupid. The funny thing was, this guy was he's from the Freedom Foundation. He's the CEO. His name is what the fuck's his dumb name? Aaron Wythe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fox News labeled him a workers' rights executive. Because basically this libertarian, because they frame their dumb bullshit as right to work. So they're saying he's pro-worker because he wants to eliminate unions. And by the way, I just want to say, fuck Warren Buffett. He presents himself as the good billionaire because he'll say out of one side of his mouth that he wants.
He's like the sweet old papaw of billionaires.
Yeah,
he wants everybody.
He always argues that his own taxes should be raised, which is just him taking money out of his pocket to fund social services and whatnot. But here has a chance to directly pay and take care of people that work for his own company. The government's not in his way or involved. He could just pay them more and give them sick days. But he's not fucking doing it.
Right.
And another thing to note here is, like, someone crunched the math, tax notes crunched the math, and the average effective tax rate when you combine state, federal, and foreign tax rates for the railroad companies from 2019 to 2021, Berkshire Hathaway paid 5.7%, Norfolk Southern 12.8%, CSX 15.1%. They're all below the 21% federal corporate tax rate and would likely be hit by the new 15% minimum, which is what's being pushed by like Bernie and shit. So, all these companies are evil as fuck, but we need them because we need to move stuff around. It's like they really have us by the balls. And my thing is, like, if you send in the army to force people to go back to work, you've essentially nationalized the union. You can just flip it and nationalize the fucking railroad, take it and make them federal employees, and give them federal worker protections, and instantly their lives would be a lot better, and we wouldn't have these fucking work stoppages, because this stuff is vital. Supply chain is national security.
Right.
Like, revolutions happen when there aren't food on the shelves.
Yeah.
And, it's like, this is ridiculous.
You can definitely make an argument that it should be like the province of the government. You know what I mean? That it shouldn't be privatized.
Mm-hmm.
But we're trying to move in the complete opposite direction in this country anyway, taking stuff that should obviously be public in nature and privatize it, or at least that's what one half wants to do.
Yeah.
So I think doing the inverse to something like the railroads is like, Lord God, the shit fit they would throw. But I mean, I'm with it though. I agree with you.
I mean, like, in England, my understanding, I listened to one of my British politics pods that I like, and they were talking about how, because the Tories in England have privatized everything, including the trains. Yeah. And it's now incredibly expensive to move around England on trains. But the funny thing is, a lot of the British rail companies are purchased by foreign rail companies that are owned by the state. So, like, France and whatever own chunks of the British transportation infrastructure, their trains are free. So British taxpayers are paying exorbitant fees to move around the country on rail, and subsidizing French people taking free train rides. So that's just funny as shit to me. This is what happens.
God damn, that's gotta be a tough pill for them to swallow, dude. Fucking, France getting one over on them like that in particular. That's bloody rough.
Yeah.
That is,
Yeah. So anyway, another problem is, like, if you're cutting down to one or two guys per train and you have no slack in the system, one guy dies or retires, where's the new train driver going to come from? If these jobs are such shit and you don't have any backup in the pipeline, the answer is they don't have a plan for that. They don't have a fucking plan for that. And you want to know what that looks like? I was reading about let's talk about airlines for a minute. We'll talk about Major League Baseball, the baseball players in a second, Matt. The airlines, I was reading about, like, why they're having such problems with flight delays and pilot supply. And it's essentially because when the pandemic happened, they laid off all their pilots, a lot of their pilots, right? So they took the free money from the government and just kept it. And a lot of those guys were older, so they just fucking retired and said, fuck it. And then when they went back, there are no new pilots in the pipeline because the two ways that the airlines, they don't pay for training. They refuse to pay to train their own pilots. You have to have like 15,000 hours to qualify for an entry-level job of flight time. So it's either people that are well off who can afford to pay for private flying lessons, which they're definitionally, because well off is a relative term, most people are not well off.
Yeah.
And the other pipeline was military pilots. They would get free but the military uses drone pilots now. There are way fewer pilots.
Oh,
so there's
shit.
there's no pipeline for free pilot training, and the airlines are doing nothing to solve it. You're not paying for their own training. So we're all going to be stuck in airports
Yeah,
for the rest of our lives, because they won't pay to fucking train people. Our national infrastructure,
That
I know,
good.
like you say stuff like that. No,
Like I
say
had
stuff
not
like that.
thought, I had not heard about or thought. I knew that I knew about the pandemic part of the problem. They laid a bunch of people off and hadn't brought them back, whatever else. But I didn't know about the second part of what you said. But that all completely makes sense. And yeah, that's one of those things where it's like we're just so resistant to change. You know what I mean? And they're basically just like, well, it would cost money to train people. And we shouldn't have to do that. Why? Because we didn't have to before. The government should be doing that. Why? Just because they used to. And they're just going to keep being like that until, there ain't no fucking pilots left effectively. And that, goddamn, it's going to drive the price of everything up. I'm going to have to, y'all are going to have to be coming to see holograms of me on stage before long. I think this shit keeps up. I got to keep flying around the country in these fucking conditions if this is going to get even worse. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. Like when I say stuff like nationalize the railroad, I realize to a lot of people I sound like fucking Chairman Mao or some shit.
Yeah.
But like, no one else is looking forward even a week into the future. Like the railroad companies aren't going to do it. The airline companies aren't going to do it. Like these systems are failing. Now having the railroad, like the job of a railroad engineer, being more attractive again, to be jobs that people want, solves part of that problem, right? But they still want to cut down to one guy per train. That's still a safety issue, and they got to get shorter hours so they don't fall asleep at the wheel and have heart attacks behind the wheel and shit like that. So anyway, it's just like somebody with more power than me ought to do something, Trey.
Yeah, they ought. They'll not.
Yeah,
but they ought.
Yeah. So if the unions do adopt this deal or a similar deal and get improved working conditions, that's going to be great. And going back to the thing that guy said earlier about people having a different relationship to work. This is a fairly huge labor victory that happened this week. Minor league baseball players are finally unionized. Now, I know that if you don't follow sports, you might care about this, but like minor league baseball players essentially get paid less than minimum wage and sleep in, prisons. They're not all very few of them are future millionaires. They're not all going to make the major leagues. But you're talking about people not paying for training. If you're going to have a major league because it's necessary to train your future workforce, but you don't want to pay for it because what you're promising people is a lottery ticket that might pay off in millions later, that's fucked.
Yeah.
That's fucked. Pay to train your workers if you want them to be trained. That goes for airlines. It goes for baseball players. Anyway, that's my labor rant. Again, unionize your workplace, kill your bosses, all that shit.
Yeah. Eat the rich. Make a hit. Yeah. I love it.
Eat the rich.
Yeah, I don't know. It feels like, again, the shit about Biden being good with labor. We've covered a lot of labor victories in recent times. There's a new one with the baseball players. It feels like, and I think what that guy said in that quote early on about, like, I feel like people's eyes have been opened a little bit. I do feel like there's been at least something of a paradigm shift, and maybe it's not all doom and gloom. You're not going to get you're going to have to force the powers that be and, the fat cats, the bigwigs, the tycoons, and all them that we were just talking about. Like, they're not going to happily go along with any of it. But, maybe it won't matter in the long run. So I don't know. I could see some positives in the recent sort of labor climate, and the way people's philosophies seem to be aligning and everything. So it's not all bad.
Like the Starbucks union is having a lot of success, and the Amazon union is doing okay. But Starbucks is breaking the law in so many ways. I don't know if you saw this story, but they have promised college loan help for people who don't join the union, which is blatantly illegal. So it's like in the national, and then with the National Labor Review Board, which is NLRB, which is it Relations Board? Anyway, I don't know, the NLRB. Whenever they step in, they essentially get called communists for just doing their fucking job. It's like, hey, this is against black letter law. You can't treat workers worse for joining the union. And they go like, shaking my fist.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, that'll do it, I think, for this bonus edition of Skews. We appreciate y'all being here. We'll be back in the future. See you Skews D on that there flagship